Ugly nightmare, eating too much, dunking your head in water over and over again. Feel bad for your kid, all of them. But most of all, us. Bad nights when I was young and drinking. Predatory men with swollen heads would buy me drinks and want to fuck me again and again because I was nothing to them, and he is our president now. Wow. If you ask me what was more political, presidents or pussies, there's only one answer: pussies. Because it's a censored word. It's an innocent word. It's a playful word. It's a childlike word for female genitalia, and you would think there was something criminal about that. That we can watch so much media about dead women, violence against women. So much stress around women having control over their bodies, abortion, health issues. The United States, we cut women's health enormously. We cut, Planned Parenthood, the organization that has more to do with the health of women than any other organization in America. And yet somehow, it's just like pussy just represents just an assertion that female reality is a human reality, is central to our tribe. It's sort of when it was so funny, like in Congress when they were going over this health care bill, they were like, well, that they didn't really, they were trying to suggest that pregnancy wasn't central to human health, that pregnancy was like a pre-existing condition, that pregnancy wasn't a genuine emergency, it shouldn't be necessarily covered. And women were banned from being on that panel, in Congress. There were no women speaking for these decisions. And so women in Congress were like, wait a second, like, how did you get here? How did you get here if you think pregnancy is not a necessary part of the human condition? And was there some other entrance to this room? And so I think it's just that kind of thinking, and just that, whenever I've been someplace where, say, Tampax is free, is part of what is in the bathroom, I think, well, that's a culture that's acknowledging that this is a human fact, that women bleed, that menstruation is simply as real as toilet paper, And again, it's sort of like the removal of that from dailiness is what's really violent and stupid and crazy and political, deeply political. Again, because women are invisible, and certainly their genitalia are invisible, and so they're not part of human poetics. They're not part of the male canon of a woman. Like a woman is this thing, this chimera, this thing that's changing all the time. Is like the avant-garde symbol, the naked woman playing chess with Marcel Duchamp. But somehow her pussy isn't. It's sort of like, it's just like a target, it's just like a hallway, I have a line someplace, I never thought I'd function as a lane for someone else's desires, but it strikes me as a very vaginal line, I just feel like it's sort of like, because I'm female, I think it is part of how I organize things, putting my own genitals front and center, it's not that I, quote, want to be talking about it all the time, it's just that the pussy is abandoned. Like if I don't say it, who will? So even, the other night I wrote this poem and I was like, why are there 3 cunts in this poem? How did that happen? And it's kind of like, it's like the sound is just kind of like, like it's just running through my body as a sort of a necessity, More than half the people on my planet are slaves because they are female. It's true. We get pushed around. We don't know how to fight. Or if we do, we're called bitches, which is an angry dog. It's somehow dirtier than a dog, a bitch in heat. And if you talk about it, people say, oh, are you a feminist? Which means, are you whiny and out of date? Are you a loser? Don't talk about it. Everything will be really okay if you don't talk about it. There aren't as many rich and famous women or female artists because their work isn't good enough. And if you talk about it, your work is probably not good enough either. So don't talk about it. It sounds like a witch hunt to me. It takes one to know one, bitch. A whiny, complaining female artist. Ugh. Wow.
Thank you. Thank God I'm too successful to talk about that. I'm one of the few women who are taken seriously. The other thing that happens if you complain is they think you're a lesbian. Who's that angry, complaining lesbian? Ever get yelled at in the street by a man? You, lesbian. Everyone laughs. Just the word dyke is funny. And you are a lesbian, which ruins everything. No one can take it seriously now. No one even wants to hear about it. Some people get off on it. The girls are fooling around with each other's pussy till a man comes around. Climax. But if a man never comes around, what do? Just fool around with each other's pussies forever? What do you think God looks like? Will I know when I die? Will God know I'm major, whatever I am? Can I trust in that love coming down the pike, getting larger and larger till I come silently into the moment I'm standing in?
The New Yorker, for example, I think I was not the only person who was shocked when there was a piece of fiction by a man in which he shot a wad in a woman's face. And I regarded that as a sort of pornographic, shocking gesture, you know? And yet I have never seen any graphic, say, a graphic lesbian scene in the New Yorker. No. You know, I've never seen anything remotely like that, you know, like coming from another sexual position, you know? So I thought, wow, I could sort of, you don't have to, that could be something exciting for either one of those two people, probably more exciting for the man than the woman. But it strikes me that you know, there's no equivalency, and there's no suggestion that there's anything uncomfortable making about that sexuality. That's human sexuality. Yes. It's like, if this is a normal thing to see, if we see this in porn all the time, if this is something people are doing in the privacy of their homes or in, you know, special public spaces, that's human. And so the New Yorker will be there, you know. But there's so many ways in which my humanity has never been there, you know, and that sends a really loud message. So I think that, like, what I want to do all the time is normalize my position by acting like it's in the world, maybe even more than it's in the world. You know, it's sort of like if somebody picks up a book of mine, I just want it to be that, welcome to my world. These are the terms of it. I'm not writing about being gay or about being a lesbian or about being genderqueer or trans or whatever. It just is the state of things here. And so you will, in the same way that you're walking down the street and there's a person who looks like that, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to knock them over? You're going to act like they're not? I mean, like, in the democracy in which I live, I want it to be just the state of things, you know? And so the only thing, work has to be utopian. I mean, that's a requirement for me. It's like what I get to do as an artist is start creating the world I want to live in.
All the blankets are mine this time. Even the sounds which the blankets are made up of. Those birds are singing this morning of thee, me, and you can have it, but I happen to be here somehow. Adulthood yuck is so firsthand. I come from a hockey town. It's where I was born. The amount of water I was born near, but nothing about me. Everyone was just skating. The poet must steal some fire, he said, and then he will steal it from her. I closed the book. It wasn't what I had in mind.
Becoming a poet, at least for me, was sort of a default position, you know, because from earliest, I felt like a very ambitious child. You know, like I wanted everything. I wanted something. You know, like I love my parents, but they seemed like disappointed people. And early on, I decided that was because they had not made decisions. They had not decided what it was that they wanted and made sure that happened. And I thought, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to make decisions, and I'm going to make this thing happen. But the problem was I couldn't stop making decisions. You know, like when I was young, I thought, well, I think I want to be this kind of, you know, scientist, or I want to write, you know, like I want a comic strip, or I think I'll be a journalist. I'll be, you know, it was just like right up until, you know, some piece of the 20s, I was just always deciding, and then becoming very excited by my decision, and then not taking any steps and making another decision, you know? And so, but the thing was, as all that was going on, I was writing poems. I just wasn't noticing because that didn't seem like an important part of my existence. And so someplace in there, I was sitting at work one day. I mean, I've written about it. I was sitting at work at a publishing company, very low-level job, and I had an electric and typewriter in front of me. It was in the 70s, and I wrote a poem, and I knew it was good, and suddenly I was like, what if the poem is real, and all this is not? You know, like, what if this is the job, you know? And it was just like, that feeling was so, because what I started to notice was that everywhere I was in these crappy post-college jobs, what was happening, the through line was poetry. That's what was happening every place, you know? And so suddenly I think that kind of decision is the only kind of decision I can make, which is to actually look at what's actually going on and put my money on that, you know? And poetry was that. Poetry was the thing that was happening. I think language is sacred. I think all language is holy. You know, it's just a strange thing that people do that make them separate and closer to life. So it's like a complicated gesture. And I think one of the funniest things I ever saw was when I was at an artist colony in McDowell, and I went to a drugstore in town, and they had a book rack, and I walked up to the book rack, and I suddenly realized it was a Christian book rack. It's very conservative, crazy religious books on the rack, and I was like, what kind of bookstore, what kind of drugstore is this? And there was one book right there that was called The Blood of the Lamb. I started reading about Lucifer, and they said that Lucifer was one of the great angels of heaven, but he got thrown out of heaven because he changed the order of the sacred words. And I thought, that is so interesting, because all a poem is changing the order. I mean, to some extent we might make up new words, but basically we're dealing with what there is, you know, and that order is interminably shifting, you know, and I think that's what we're doing, you know, is saying, okay, I see this world, and what if you do this, and put this down here, and put that there, and like, how about that pattern? You know, like, what about putting pussy here instead of down here? What does that feel like, you know? And it's just like, every time, that's a profane act to change the order, you know, and that's what we must do. I hopped on an Amtrak to New York in the early 70s, and I guess you could say my hidden years began. I thought, well, I'll be a poet. What could be more foolish and obscure? I became a lesbian. You can laugh at that. Every woman in my family looks like a dyke, but it's really stepping off the flag when you become one. Well, holding this ignominious pose, I have seen and I have learned, and I'm beginning to think there's no escaping history. A woman I was currently having an affair with said, you know, you look like a Kennedy. I felt the blood rising in my cheeks. People have always laughed at my Boston accent, confusing large for large, party for party. But when this unsuspecting woman evoked for the first time my family name, I knew the jig was up. Yes, I am a Kennedy. My efforts to remain obscure have not served me well. Starting as a humble poet, I quickly climbed to the top of my profession, assuming a position of leadership and honor. It is right that a woman should call me out now. Yes, I am a Kennedy, and I await your orders. You are the new Americans. The homeless are wandering the streets of our nation's greatest city. Homeless men with AIDS are among them. Is that right, that there's no homes for the homeless, that there's no free medical help for these men and women? That they get the message as they are dying that this is not their home? And how are your teeth today? Can you afford to fix them? How high is your rent? If art is the highest and most honest form of communication of our time, and the young artist is no longer able to move here to speak to her time, yes, I could, but that was 15 years ago, and remember as I must, I am a Kennedy. Shouldn't we all be Kennedys? This nation's greatest city is home of the businessman, home of the rich artist, people with beautiful teeth who are not on the streets. What should we do about this dilemma? Listen, I have been educated. I have learned about Western civilization. Do you know what the message of Western civilization is? I am alone. Am I alone today? I don't think so. Am I the only one with bleeding gums here today? Am I the only homosexual in this room? Am I the only one whose friends have died, are dying now? And my art can't be supported until it's gigantic, bigger than everyone else's, confirming the audience's feeling that they are alone, that they alone are good, deserve to buy the tickets to see this art, are working, are healthy, should survive, and are normal. Are you normal today? Everyone here, are we all normal? It is not normal for me to be a Kennedy, but I am no longer ashamed, no longer alone. I'm not alone today because we are all Kennedys, and I am your president. I mean, I feel like a poem in a certain way just says, I want. You know, I think a poem really is a statement of desire, you know, but all the desires, you know, and maybe not all of them all the time, but little bits and pieces of it, you know. And so I think that like a poem is like my cultural mobility is there, and my desire to be included is there, and that just gets refracted by every experience of language that I've had since I started writing and learning language and learning to read and learning to hear, in the same way that, like there are sounds that people find deeply unpleasant. Everybody has like styrofoam or, chalk on the board, and then there's sounds that you're drawn to. And there's no explaining that, like that's just like something much deeper than, science could tell us sometimes genetically why certain sounds, but it's like, so that's going on and that's just beyond me. But certainly the first time I ever heard, heard somebody say that Black English counts, you know what I mean? Like in the 70s, linguistics, suddenly they were like, there's such a thing as Black English, eubonics. And this is a valid, because they were starting to look at why kids in different class backgrounds weren't learning to read. And part of it was that they were throwing out vernacular and saying, start over here with this white language that nobody around you has ever used, And so when I heard that, I thought, well, why isn't the vernacular that I've learned and constructed? And it just like, my mother was the children of Polish immigrants. Her first language was Polish. And so her English was impeccable, and she was proud of it, and she loved slang. Her sexiness was how American she was and how normal she was and yet her grammar was absolutely flawless because she wanted to be right. She was a smart woman. She was, and so she just policed us. And I come from a family of readers, but the people next door who were far more exciting than my family, they would go fishing, they would have brawls, they would chase fire trucks, they had dogs. They were just like real in a way that my family was not real. Like they said things like bare naked, and they said ain't. They said the N-word. They just said their English, their American English was so raw and so immediate. And, to some huge extent, I wanted to talk like them because I wanted to be them and I wanted to be part of their family. Like sometimes I would say, I don't know if I said the word actually when I was a child, but I might have because I read a lot and they would laugh at me. And so I would change my English when I hung out with them, And it's just like, and that became how I talked. When I hung out with them. It's just like, I don't even know, so it's just like, I feel like I cobbled a language to be in the world that I want, in the way I wanted to be in it. And then later I'm hanging out with these people and they're intellectuals and these people, or I go to college and these people and I go to the poetry world and they all went, and it's like, it just is evolving, like this kind of evolving recipe for how to speak in a kind of American that is mine, and it's just like it becomes all those places I've been, and it's sort of like, and they're all available, and so I think when I write a poem, I feel like I'm just writing from all of those places, and any one of them, and I think swearing is part of that too. It's just like suddenly it's like you kind of want to lean in and make a certain kind of point, and I hear myself saying fuck, because it needs that, and it's just like, and right away, that when you've said that, it means this whole bunch of people won't listen, and this whole bunch of people will listen, And so I think what excites me is to think that what I'm presenting is a lot of codes together. Got a slice, burned the roof of my mouth, knew I would, it was delicious. I fast walked someplace, my feet were cold, but the slice built a fire in my stomach. I said thank you to the natural elements, cold night, digestion. What is it about the January feeling, past everything else, low glowing hunger that propels me around? I may be wrong, predictable to picture you over here or us over there. It's a miracle, rolling golden in the coldest month, going forward and back from so much else. There wasn't even a noun around. I walked in from the snow nearing Christmas, and you touched my black coat with your handsome hand, and believe me, I came lit and am changed.